1982, a young band from London with a cross-dressing lead singer burst into the UK charts and quickly became the biggest pop group in the world.
The great thing about the band was that we controlled everything we did. We decided what we wanted to do. We decided what we wanted to play. We decided how we wanted to look. And you just don't see people taking that kind of chance anymore.
What I wanted to do was be the most successful group in the world as a drummer, and I achieved that ambition.
And the money was pouring in, the lifestyle was great. It was fun, driving a Ferrari at 22.
20 years on, the Culture Club legacy continues, from TV adverts to the West End stage. In this Smash special, we celebrate one of pop's most dramatic stories, a tale of sex, drugs and rock and soul.
With Culture Club, it's a living, breathing soap opera.
In 1977, London was engulfed by punk. But waiting in the wings was a far more glamorous and decadent trend, fueled by disco, glam rock and Bowie. And one Bowie fanatic was gagging to step into his shoes.
The most important person in my youth was David Bowie. I became obsessed. I became, you know, a #1 Bowie aficionado.
There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd go online.
I think the only thing that I could have ever done was sing, because it's self-employment. And so rock and roll was my revenge.
I remember when I first met George, I said to him, George, I said, David Bowie is like the tip of the iceberg. I said, somebody's going to get in on that bandwagon and make a fortune. And it was so weird. And do you know, after I said it to him, I looked at him and I thought, he's going to do it. I just got a flash.
Boy George wanted to be in a band. And it came about that I thought he had a good voice. And why not?
Malcolm McLaren gave George a job in his new punk band, Bow Wow Wow, alongside a 15-year-old singer called Annabella.
The first time I saw George was in a picture in the NME. There was a caption saying that he was supporting Bow Wow Wow and that they were playing at a roller disco in Hammersmith. And I was living in Hammersmith at the time, so I thought, let's have a look.
So this crowd of people that paid to come and see Bow Wow Wow, suddenly we are confronted with this thing in a dress.
The audience was horribly partisan. Thought, Annabella is the singer, who's this fag?
The crowd were just, they were like, who the hell is that?
I was getting concerned, do I still want to be in this rock and roll business? Isn't it all getting a bit too pantomimic? It was against my wishes, but I had to basically perform, you know, the ruthless task as managers supposedly have to do, and that was to now fire this protege.
Mikey came to the club, and I was DJing in the club, and he just walked up to me and said, do you want to be in a band with me? And I said, all right, fine.
Do you really want to hurt me? Do you really want to make me cry?
Mikey and George had the look, but they were missing a drummer. Enter ex-member of The Damned, John Moss.
Most bands were a type of music, a progressive band, a punk band, a funk band, a black band, a white band. And with Culture Club, it was being able to suggest things and that people go, yeah, great. So you could do any type of music you wanted to. It's very eclectic, and that was liberating.
I have a very weird history with John, because when I was about 16, I was going out with a guy called Les Daly, who ran a girls' magazine called My Guy. The pin-up of the month was this guy called John Moss, who was in a band called London. And I'll never forget this, because Les said, you've got to see this guy, he's gorgeous. So I see this picture, and I'm like, yeah, he's really pretty. I found out John's phone number, and I rang him up and went, blah, 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 blah. I was in Bow Wow Wow, and I got kicked out because I'm too effeminate, and now I want to start a band, and, you know, have you got a drum kit? And he was like, I think he was so kind of like intrigued by this phone call. He said, come and meet me. And I went to his house and met him, and fell madly in love with him the minute I saw him.
And I knew when I met George that he was an alien. I mean, and I fell in love with him, and I just had that sense that it was right.
John had this picture of me put next to his bed for about 6 months, and I completely looked like a woman. And the mother, I thought I was a woman. I thought it was a girl. So I knock on the door of this mansion in Hampstead. This lady opens the door and she goes, "Eh?" Looks me up and down and goes, "Jonathan." And the meal that I was meant to have, I ended up having with the servants in the kitchen. And I was like, "Your mum doesn't like me, does she?" I think John had been in a few bands that had kind of never quite made it, and he had this hunger to be in a successful pop band. And then when he saw me, it was like, okay, this is going to work.
Words of you I have spoken. I could waste 1,000 years.
There was a real vision about where we were going and what was going to happen with the band. You know, it was like a glorious 2-year plan that John had. And, you know, used to love to hear him say, so it's easy, we'll just write songs, we'll do a couple of gigs, we'll get a record deal, we'll go on Top of the Pops and we'll have a #1, and I go, yeah! You know, a little kid from Essex, that sounds great.
John said, let's do some real pop music and let's have some fun. And that's when the ideas started coming through for songs, the ideas for the look, the whole multicultural thing.
We were the transvestite, the Jew, the Jamaican, and the Essex oik.
We had the Star of David and the Hebrew writing. Well, obviously that was my influence because nobody had ever done that before. Plus we had the Catholic, the Bleeding Hearts and the Flowers and everything, and that was why the band was called Culture Club.
They loved Motown and they loved glam rock and they loved punk music and they loved dancing. It was a completely different look, a completely different sound, but it had the punk spirit of we can do this.
If you thought seriously about the recipe for Culture Club, you'd never do it. You wouldn't have such a poncy title. You wouldn't take the risk of the gender-bending bit. You wouldn't take those little kind of soft reggae sort of rhythms. And that's why it was so brilliant.
It was very easy to become very fashionable because of the way George looked. And from the first gig, we always had full venues and everybody dressed up in the audience, and it was great and it was hip and it was cool. But crossing that over was proving a little more difficult. I mean, a lot of people passed on the band. A lot of record companies passed, EMI passed, and I think Polydor passed. So we were getting a little nervous.
Coming up next, the world falls in love with Boy George, but Boy George is in love with someone else.
Here, at the dawn of the 80s, there was a desire to find a music in which the record industry could somehow work with what was club culture. And out of that was born one band called Culture Club.
In 1981, Virgin Records took a chance on Clubland's trendiest band and signed them.
It was part of, as we saw it, a fairly important youth movement. It had come out of the new romantic scene. So we felt that that would give us some momentum in terms of marketing and promoting it.
In 1982, Culture Club finally got their big break, thanks to a rockabilly with a runny nose.
We owe our career to Shaker Stevens. We just entered at about 38. So Shaker Stevens, who was 3 or 4 places in front of us, was chosen instead, and he got ill. So the night before we got on Top of the Pops, we get this phone call. Do you want to be on Top of the Pops? And we're like, do we want to be on Top of the Pops? Are you insane? Of course we do.
For the first time on Top of the Pops, it's Culture Club.
I stayed up all night getting my outfit ready, putting ribbons in my hair. I didn't sleep. I mean, it was just like the biggest thing in the world. It was like, oh my God, we're going to be on national TV.
Let me love and steal.
actually worried that I was playing the right notes while I was miming. And of course, I got no camera time at all, you know, apart from maybe a fleeting thing in the back. Oh, there goes Roy. And I came off and I was like, how was it? And the guy was just like, from the record company, he's like, George was amazing, this is going to be a sensation. You know, and I was like, so the song doesn't matter really. Okay, that's interesting.
You hope every band you sign will become successful, but you don't often think these people are going to become the biggest band in the world, which is in fact what happened with Culture Club.
In my heart the fire is burning. Choose my colour fine.
Do You Really Want to Hurt Me stormed up the charts, but it was Boy George's dress sense that stole the show.
When people saw me on telly, they went absolutely berserk. It was like the reaction was just so... I was so surprised by it.
It was just so wonderful to have something new happen, one of these great treasures, when music sometimes just seems to be settling down into a really banal post-punk routine controlled by record companies, to suddenly have this sign of life appear.
In the newspapers the next day, it was like, is this a man or a woman? Is this a man or a woman? Which isn't really a question that had ever sort of been asked in pop music before. You'd had androgynous performers like David Bowie, but I mean, no one's ever going to really mistake David Bowie for a girl. Whereas Boy George genuinely looked quite androgynous and strange.
People thought he was a cuddly toy, and I think the confusion about his gender actually took away a lot of the scariness, the confrontational aspect of what he was.
The single went to #1 in 27 countries and #2 in the US charts. But presenting the band to the US of A was going to be a challenge.
The part of America that lies between the East and West Coast is a very conservative place, and it certainly was at that time, and I don't believe they would have been expected to have taken immediately to a flamboyant drag queen. Gay drag queen.
They kept George off the cover because it was mainly breaking on black radio and they didn't want this sort of white transvestite on the cover. And then once the record was on the radio and people were buying it, then they introduced the video to MTV and everybody saw it and everybody was talking about it, and then bang.
Despite the single selling over 6.5 million copies worldwide, few fans realised who this love song was about.
He wrote songs about himself in the context of his relationship with John. You know, that song, Do You Really Want to Hurt Me, he's singing it to John.
Of course it was written about me, but it was also autoerotica, I think, if you like. It was more about George than me.
Talking about believe me. If it's true you do not know. This by love's without a reason. I'm prepared to let you go.
Our first hit was Do You Really Want to Hurt Me, and in fact, I was the one that didn't want that put out.
And George said, no, we can't. I don't want that released as the next single. And I said, well, why not?
I screamed at them and I said, you cannot release this song. It's too personal.
It's over again.
Little did I know that was the whole point. The more personal you got, the more success you got.
Do you really want to make me cry?
Every song was about him, you know. When we had rows, I'd go off and write songs. Time won't give me time.
Put your head on my shoulder. Sing me in a river of tears. This could be the best place yet, but you must overcome your fears. Ooh, in time.
Their fights were quite famous within the people on the inside of the band. And it was quite a big struggle many times to keep it quiet. At video shoots when George would refuse to come out of his room and John would put gasoline rags underneath the door and set fire to them.
Me and George were beating each other up. I think that was quite worrying for them because they thought that it wouldn't last very long.
I hated all that tension. It was like, you know, every 2 days we're splitting up because of them. You know, the band's got to break up because they're fighting.
The most important thing was that we were writing songs. And as long as we were doing that, we were happy.
George's relationship with John, sort of love-hate relationship, was great for lyrics.
Make me feel any colder. Time is like a clock in my heart. Touch me, touch was the heat too much. I thought I lost you from the start.
George had a head full of ideas, was desperate to write songs.
He would come into the rehearsal room and just hum melodies to us, and with a couple of words, or maybe sing a chorus to us, and we'd construct the songs around him.
I mean, the thing is, when you're that age and you've been wanting to do that for so long, you have so many ideas stocked up, you know, that you just come out with it all at once. Suddenly the energy's in the room and the people are excited and something happens. We call it song heaven.
By 1983, Culture Club had 3 top 10 singles in both the UK and US charts, and Boy George was fast becoming the most famous pop star on the planet.
George was the star. He needed the others to help him write the songs and to kind of put the musical framework around them. I think Culture Club were a good vehicle for George.
It was also right around that same time that the daily newspapers began to cover pop, because suddenly it was a visual medium, and George was incredibly important in expanding the visual side of pop.
The smash hits world had just begun, and the whole face blitz thing. George was right in there, very visual looking. Coupled with, you know, a great kind of pop sensibility, it was just a perfect moment. And so really, very, very early, he had a mass pop audience.
He was never out of the papers. It never really had anything to do with the music or anything like that. It had to do with some outrageous remark he'd made or how he dressed. He became famous for being famous.
When you become very successful, the thing the press want to know is, are you bisexual? So I say, when I want sex, I have to buy it.
There was something more to him than just being a freak. I think he proved he was a kind of artist. It's difficult to say what kind of artist he was, but he was an artist in something, self-promotion, I suppose. But even then, he never seemed to be actually hustling it.
There's another one. Do you sleep with men? I never sleep. I usually try and stay awake whoever I sleep with.
I think the press liked me because I was gobby and I talked, and you know, I was good at giving interviews, and they weren't used to it. I mean, most people, if you look at a lot of the artists now, they've got nothing to say. They've got no experience. I mean, they're children. They've done nothing. You know, I was going clubbing from the age of 14, 13, and I'd already lived quite a sort of eccentric existence before I started the band. So there was a lot to talk about.
I think there are hundreds of pubs all over England where there are drag queens you can go and laugh at. I'm not a drag queen. I don't want to be like, I'm very serious. And I think if you want to confront the world with eccentricity, you have to have a good explanation. You know, it's okay to be a clown in a circus, but not to be a clown in a supermarket.
And Boy George himself played up to being this quite asexual character. These days he's quite gung-ho about his homosexuality. He wasn't publicly out. He never came out in the entire time that Culture Club were famous and said, I am gay. He said, I'd rather have a cup of tea than sex.
A lot of the things that George said, I'd rather have a cup of tea to sex, was obviously a blatant lie, and anybody who believed that was really stupid.
George was a man of extremes, and you know, he was basically presenting this clean image, you know, whilst in the middle of a torrid relationship with the drummer. England's got such a history of drag queens in show business, from like Danny LaRue, like Dick Emery, all these people you grow up with, and you don't, you know, Monty Python, they're all dressed up as women all the time, and like, you know, you don't even question it, you just think it's funny, you know? And I think George played on that, he's just in a great tradition of the English drag queen.
You'd rather go to bed with a pot of tea than anything else?
No, not with a pot of tea. Have a pot of tea instead of going to bed.
Right, that's it.
He was this cuddly, wonderful, asexual creature that England is notorious for creating, and the media was going to definitely be his lover. But as being lovers, you also got to understand that lovers can also hate each other.
Who's got the new agenda? I'll be your baby. I'll be
before Do You Really Want to Hurt Me, it was the hippest freak crowd in the world you've ever seen at our shows. And then suddenly it was like, you know, the grannies were coming.
I thought we'd be some kind of cult band. And I'll never forget the night we played at Guildford Town Hall, and the whole crowd was in dreadlocks and ribbons and hats and screaming Frank Teddy Bears. And it was like the Bay City Rollers. And I looked at John and looked around at John and I went, what's going on?
I get a crazy feeling, makes paces in my head. It's nothing that you do to me, it's nothing that you said.
I wonder whether he made girls want to fuck or not. I don't know, because girls were definitely the majority of his fans.
Half an hour for the plaits.
Half an hour to do the plaits. What about the makeup?
Not very long, about 10 minutes.
Why would some little girl want a picture of a guy in makeup on her bedroom wall? Why?
They're stereotype girls. They follow pop stars around because they're scared of real sex, and so they latch onto somebody that's an illusion.
It's like the native you send her junction function. The boy with pop is standing.
I think that a lot of girls at that kind of pre-pubescent stage are attracted to gay men because we're not a threat.
The reason that lots of girls follow pop bands like that is not because they really like the music, it's because they really fancy, you know, they have a fantasy idea about the singer involved. They just didn't think he was gay.
I'll tumble for you, I'll tumble for you, I'll tumble for you.
With Culture Club now the ultimate teen band, George and John were forced to keep their relationship a secret.
In the very early days of our career, John and I were quite openly affectionate with each other. And then as we started to get more and more successful, John felt that there was this kind of need to hide our relationship. So everybody in the band knew, everybody in the record company knew, but we just lived this kind of stupid lie.
If you have a relationship, I mean, you don't have to make it public. All right, if you're a public persona, you do. But at that time, it would not have been a good thing to do.
I was so like, you know, I wanted people to know. So what have I got to be ashamed of?
Every time George would be upset, he'd go, that's it, I'm going to announce it to the press. And we'd be like, no, don't do that. You know, because it's different now. People don't really, you know, they don't care, they know. But in the 80s, it wasn't as open as that. I mean, even Elton John was getting married in the 80s, you know. So there was still a lot of illusion in rock and roll about who was gay and who wasn't.
I think that John, you know, just had a problem with his sexuality.
It was to protect the band's career, you know, and why not? What's wrong with that?
The sexualisation of it would have made it something else completely. It would have politicised it, in fact, and that becomes something that the British public actually don't like. It's that wonderful fine edge between it being the nudge and the wink and the camp thing, which we love, the pantomime thing, and actually being political and therefore dangerous and therefore dirty. We don't like that.
Coming up next, the Culture Club dream is over and the world wakes up to the real Boy George. By the end of 1983, Culture Club was officially the biggest band in the world. Colour by Numbers, their second album, sold over 16 million copies. Karma Chameleon gave Culture Club the holy grail of pop music, a #1 hit record in America. But again, it was Boy George's image that stole the limelight.
I love him. I love him.
Oh, I think he's sexy.
Really?
It was the middle of the Reagan years. America was about as conservative as it had been in 20 years. And all of a sudden, bounding into it comes this London Irish transvestite. And Americans don't mind alternative lifestyles as long as they seem to be safe.
George's image is going to cross over any kind of cultural boundaries. He's one of those people that you could get a photograph of another person and put sort of dreadlocks on them and a hat, and you'd know exactly who they were meant to be.
With those clothes on, and that makeup on, he was much more than just a person. He was a living brand.
There were a lot of other kind of gender bender characters that came along at the time. Most of them didn't really have any sort of prolonged success.
Come a chameleon. You come and go. You come and go.
It very quickly became just Boy George, and the Culture Club thing looked a little sad. And the other guys in the band started to look a little bit like the session musicians that played with T-Rex or whatever, and they became less and less real, and you forgot their names, and you had no idea who they were, and what are they doing there. To the extent the harmonica player and Karma Chameleon seemed to be more of Culture Club than those guys, and that must have been pretty embarrassing to them.
I hate Karma Chameleon because I think it ruined our career, although it was our biggest hit. You know, it's very nice now. I still get checks every 6 months, which are very nice. Thank you very much. But I always felt that, in a way, it shortened our career.
I wasn't that keen on dressing up as a sort of like 19th century card shark in Marlow. You know, it wasn't like South Carolina, wherever it's supposed to be.
I used to have a hard time with some of the outfits that George would bring along. You know, I really did. I thought some of them were very silly. Mikey was the one, though. George used to love dressing Mikey up. He was like his personal Barbie doll. I had like dreadlocks for a while, and I've got like green eyeshadow on. I'm just like, it looks such a honest. It's so funny. But of course, the money was pouring in, the lifestyle was great. It was Friday night, we want to go to New York tomorrow, you know, and just get Concord and go to New York for the weekend. It was the 80s. It was fun, driving a Ferrari at 22.
I got to travel the world. I got paid stupid money for doing something that I loved, because I love singing and I love writing songs.
Well, I just suddenly thought, this is great, I'm travelling, I was with George, and doing what I always wanted to do.
But at the same time, I lost a lot of my freedom, and I lost control of my life for a while.
Pictures we know so well, they shine in your eyes when you kiss and tell. Strange pictures we never see, but you're always there, like a ghost in my dreams. And I keep on telling you, please don't do the things you do. When you do those things for my puppet strings, and the strangers fall for you.
It all happened too fast for us. It was like living in a goldfish bowl with 3 other guys and being under a microscope and not really having any time to yourself and all the other cliches that go along with being in a successful band.
We were so tired, I mean, we had such a schedule, because George and myself, well, George did more than me and I did more than the others, interviews, so really, you know, you do a gig, you calm down. What are you going to do? You can't hang out backstage with the public, it wasn't that kind of band. So we go back to the room. Because I was going out with George, it was self-sealed units, if you want. Although you can see the walls being punched out half the time.
The record company would treat you like a donkey. But, you know, when you're on that roller coaster, you're kind of so grateful that you have a career. But I did get trapped into this idea that I had to look a certain way at all times. Going out like that, you literally could not move. I couldn't go into a shop. I couldn't walk down the street, you know, and people literally would like mob me everywhere I went. I had to let it go. It just was driving me insane. No more, please.
George had left Culture Club, there'd be no Culture Club. If the drummer had left or the guitarist had left, there still would have been a Culture Club if they were still delivering the goods, as in hit songs. So of course he was Culture Club.
The story of Culture Club is quite simple. It was Culture Club the music, then it was Culture Club and Boy George, and then it was Boy George, and then it was Boy George's hat. George became so famous that his image ended up overshadowing the band, which I hated. I mean, you dream of being on the cover of Rolling Stone as a musician, and we got the cover of Rolling Stone, and there's like George in my head under his arm. It wasn't a fair representation of the effort that we put into the band. Spent many nights hitting the scotch over that one, I tell you.
Girls that cross the street, you never know who you might be, who's in disguise. Ooh, as you blow a storm, there's no one there to keep you warm. It's no surprise, there's something in my eyes.
In 1984, Culture Club were nominated for the world's biggest music prize, a Grammy. But at what should have been their finest hour, Boy George blew it.
The big new artist is Culture Club.
Thank you, America. You've got taste, style, and you know a good drag queen when you see one.
The minute he used the words drag queen, he rubbed America's faces in it, and suddenly, out there in the Midwest, they woke up and thought, oh my God, he's a transvestite.
You could just see the executives at CBS going, oh, he didn't just say that, did he? Oh my God.
Culture Club never really quite made up the ground they lost that night.
People feel the world with now.
And the band's fortune went from bad to worse with the release of their third album.
The band basically ate itself in the end. It was moving so fast, it just couldn't last. For example, the third album, Waking Up with a House on Fire, aptly titled Waking Up with a House on Fire, was done in 6 weeks. I just didn't want to work like that.
War was stupid, and people are stupid, and love means nothing in some strange quarters. War was stupid.
Songwriting at that point suffered, I feel, personally, from just being under too much pressure to keep coming up with material.
Politicizing pop, it just didn't work for Culture Club. They'd gone from happy pop like Karma Chameleon to suddenly war is stupid, people are stupid. And people didn't buy it. Teen bands always try to grow up, which they did, and it never works.
The War Song was Culture Club's last top 3 hit, and for John and George, the love affair was nearly over.
They were working together, which was kind of bad news in a way. Do you know what I mean? Mixing business and pleasure.
Culture Club was the relationship between John Moss and George, and as soon as they broke up, so did the band.
I think when it came down to it, the band held us together, but outside the band, we didn't really get on. No matter what anybody says about the arguments of who did this and who did that, obviously the drugs didn't help, you know, but that was sort of afterwards. I think that we just moved on. So it was a relationship that was fantastic, and it ended. And that happens in life. I mean, whatever reasons there are for it, it happens.
Life will never be the same as it was again. Life will never be the same as it was again. My anger and my joy, my tears and pain. Life will never be the same as it was again.
With Culture Club's popularity dwindling, George chose to hook up with his old pal Marilyn and hit New York's clubs and Class A drugs.
We're really good friends, and I don't really give a damn what people think about our friendship. What we do in our private lives and the fun we have is our own business.
I saw a lot of people taking advantage, and I felt, from my point of view, that, you know, I couldn't fight, because, I mean, if I'd fought for George, I would have looked like sort of some jealous, screaming boyfriend.
Oh, darling. You could see the quality control over his career was slipping, and he ended up on the A-team.
Poor George. Wow.
You've got this program which is all about the American way and the good guys always win in the end and true upstanding people, and in the middle of it you've got this gay smackhead in a dress. You know, fantastic. You've got to say, punk rock.
Hey, who are you guys?
We're the A-team. Son of a gun.
So there.
It was around 1986, and the group were definitely on their uppers, and suddenly there was this revelation that Boy George was a heroin addict.
How you doing?
George had gone from being every mother's favorite son to this emaciated junkie.
I've got my numbers for now.
Suddenly you were confused. You were confused with the reality of what Boy George represented.
Now, Boy George and the reports that he's a drug addict and seriously ill. Today, the singer was quoted as saying that newspaper reports about him were a load of rubbish.
The press really came down on him. But you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You know, you can't manipulate the press. The press is bigger than any star, you know. The press will have their way and will bring you down if they want to.
There was a sense that it was kind of imploding and that George was out of control and that, you know, he couldn't possibly continue.
For the first time in George's career, his image was out of his control. After the heroin revelations, everything seemed to get seedier and seedier. It would have been, I think, pretty hard for Culture Club after all that to make a comeback.
After months of being targeted by the press, in July 1986, George found himself in the dock facing a drugs charge.
The coroner was told Golding, Boy George and a third man were arrested in West London. A police officer had seen them in the street and believed they were under the influence of drugs.
Because we'd turned him into such a pantomime figure in a way, such a mascot for good times and fun, that he was the last person you would have expected to actually have been associated with that dreaded word, heroin.
Oh, it's just classic George to go from, you know, not doing anything to heroin in like 3 weeks. You know, people normally take quite a long drug career to end up addicted to heroin, you know, but classic George, like, straight in there.
Why did I become a junkie? If I could answer that question, my God, I would be such a rich man.
The reason I was charged today, I was never caught in possession of heroin. I was charged because of Fleet Street. Thank you, Fleet Street. So now they've got what they wanted.
When the press turns around and turns against you, as sooner or later they will, because that is the nature of the press. Tough, really. You've signed your pack.
George's problem, and this was the biggest mistake he made, was that he was overexposed. You get too much press and they really enjoy seeing you pull down. The press latches onto the public feeling.
They treated me like a fox. They were printing headlines like, find him, hunt him. I felt very low in myself, you know, I felt that my career was over. It was like this huge kind of media spotlight was shone on me. And, you know, I was trying to get well. I was trying to kick a very serious drug habit. And they weren't making it any easier for me. You know, they were like making it worse.
Boy George owns this house, which is large and well protected. But he doesn't live here at the moment, and he was not here when Radetzky's body was found.
It just seems like there was one piece of bad news after another. One of his friends had died, and there was just all sorts of horrible stuff happening around them, and there was this general sense of the whole thing falling apart.
In 1987, Boy George was back, minus the drugs and the band.
Many pop idols seem to fall into that drugs trap. How was it that you lost your way?
I think a lot of sort of young adults, you know, round about my age, go through a very self-destructive period. And I think, you know, it was a lot to do with success, you know, and not being able to handle that.
In retrospect, do you regret that it all happened to you too quickly before you could handle the fame and the fortune?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is pretty strange, you know, when you sort of come from nothing and then all these things happen. And, you know, this industry is full of people who want to sort of like get you high or get you sort of, you know, mess you up.
You sheltered me from harm, kept me warm, kept me warm.
Boy George's first solo hit went straight to #1.
When it went to #1, I was so surprised. And I remember being in this room and not knowing whether to laugh, cry, pee, or poo. I was just like, what am I going to do? I couldn't believe it. But I always felt that it was a sort of public sympathy vote. I always felt that people went out and bought that record because of what the press had done to me. I think there's this British thing that we have, which is a terrible thing, that, you know, if you've had success of any kind in any field, people really seem to despise you if you come back. It's like, go away. You've had your turn. You aren't allowed to come back and do something else. Well, fuck you.
Coming up next, the band make a comeback and Boy George is reborn.
Be scared. Be very scared.
From Bombay to Bangalore, all the Hindus know the score. If you wanna live some more, Hare Hare Hare.
By the early 90s, Boy George was a full-on Hare Krishna, drug-free, and reveling in a new career as a celebrity DJ.
He came out of London club life, and he kind of retreated back into club life, which sort of supported him as a he became a DJ. He was able to do that, you know. Clubland kind of welcomed him back with open arms.
With George still stealing the limelight, the rest of Culture Club are making their own music.
What I wanted to do was be in the most successful group in the world as a drummer, and I achieved that ambition. I've done a few other things, but nothing compares to playing the drums. I know it's, you know, it's a bit sad really, but I love playing and that's it. So I haven't really changed at all. I mean, basically, that's great. That's allowed me to, you know, send my children to private school, and, you know, I own my own house. I don't have a mortgage. I'm very lucky, you know. I can eat well, and nice car if I want it, you know, blah, 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 etc. But nothing's changed because I still like playing those bloody things over there.
Mikey now runs his own music publishing company and is producing new talent.
I don't necessarily have to work, but I do. I want to work. I just couldn't sit around doing nothing. But Culture Club was so big that, you know, it left us all with a pension.
Roy is now a Hollywood-based film composer and only comes back to London on Culture Club business.
I just passed my time, really. Enjoying life in the sunshine, playing tennis and golf, going on bike rides and making music.
Despite George's success as a solo artist, something drew him back to the band.
We always say we'll never work together again, and then something comes up and we end up working.
He doesn't have to do Culture Club. He doesn't have to do it, but it's a great thing. It's a huge part of his life, and it's what created him.
In 1998, Culture Club reformed for the first time in 15 years and smashed straight back into the charts.
Me on my mind. Oh, I just wanna be loved. Don't wanna find you, baby, but I'm much too proud to say it now.
When we got back together, it was wonderful because it gave us a chance to get back on the road, doing what we love, without the hurly-burly of 100 teenagers chasing you everywhere.
It got a little crazy, but now it's sort of calmed down. We realise that we can do the odd gig here and there, and obviously people out there will come and see the band. So let's give the people what they want.
Oh, I just wanna be loved. Don't wanna find you, baby, but I'm much too proud to say it now.
We tour for a few months, hate each other's guts. I think that there's a love-hate relationship that we have. We love to hate each other.
But I'm much too proud to shout it out.
With Culture Club, it's a living, breathing soap opera.
And the soap opera's not over yet.
Hello!
George has written a West End musical based on his life story and featuring some of Culture Club's greatest hits.
There's a big appetite for nostalgia at the moment. Culture Club were the soundtrack to a lot of people's lives when they were growing up.
At the time, we would have thought it bizarre that 20 years later it's become a musical. But when you yourself are 20 years on, it's less bizarre somehow, because in a way I prefer the musical to, say, some of those here and now tours.
I didn't want Taboo to be just about me. I wanted it to be the story of a group of people clawing their way to stardom. Ewan is so incredible as me. I mean, he is me. He's like, it's the weird. There's 2 or 3 moments in the show where I still have to kind of pinch myself.
Do you really want to hurt me? Do you really want to make me cry?
He's got me down to a T, and it's just really, I just sit there like a proud mother.
Do you really want to make me cry?
Obviously, I deal with the drug aspect of my career, and that for me is one of the hardest things to watch in the show. I've kind of detached from that person. I can look at it very objectively. I don't have any problem with that period because it's kind of distant, it's gone.
Gone? Not quite. Earlier this year, George joined the cast as the outrageous 80s clubber Lee Bowery.
Ich bin kurz, can't you see? Look at you, hey, look at me.
Be scared. Be very scared. I'm not a real actor, you know. But then neither is Madonna.
Fuck off.
He's found new things to do. He's maintained and indeed developed in a way an interest for music. He really knows his stuff, and he's not really about a nostalgia thing. And he hates the idea of the nostalgia thing. I think you put Culture Club back together more about him and John than actually trying to cash in on any nostalgia.
The important thing about Culture Club is that we were all nobodies, you know, and we did a lot about growing up in public.
The great thing about the band was that we controlled everything we did. We decided what we wanted to do. We decided what we wanted to play. We decided how we wanted to look. And you just don't see people taking that kind of chance anymore.
Culture Club were one of the seminal bands of the 80s, and I think we changed a lot. It was a pretty sort of gruesome place before that. It was pretty dull.
The songs have remained valid, and the songs are still played all over the world, and people have great memories of the music. I don't think we're ever going to go away.
Come a chameleon. You come and go. You come and go. Loving will be the colors of life, my dream. Red